Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Machin Leira Online Smicha. David HaMelech says in Tehillim Kuf Mem Beis, Kuf Mem Aleph, David HaMelech says about davening. He says, Tikain tefilasi ketoiras lefanecha. My tefillah, my prayers, let it be like a ketoiras, like the service of ketoiras for you. We find that there's something unique and something special by the Maisa ketoiras that David HaMelech insisted and requested that the tefillah should be not like a regular carbon, even more than a regular carbon. It should be accepted like ketores. Now, when you think about the Maisa ketores, obviously it's one of the avodas in the Beis Hamikdash, but when it comes to the tefillah part of the ketores, you find something extremely unique. Throughout the day, we know there are certain things that we say 3 times a day. Shemoneh Esrei, we have 3 tefillahs. There are some things that you say twice a day. You know, you also say 3 times Ashrei, twice by Shachris and once by Mincha. A lot of things. There's some things you say twice a day, Kriya Shema, but there's sometimes you don't realize that there are some tefillahs or are some statements that we say during our tefillahs that you chapsich, that I say it more than once or more than even twice, and I say it 3 times a day like Shemoneh Esrei, and that is the Ptum Haktoras. Ptum Haktoras we say twice by Shachris, once before the beginning of Shachris, and once right before we end, right after Kavi, right before Aleinu. What's the significance of this, and why do we say it so many times? So, before we get to that, let me tell you some, as mentioned, David HaMelech insisted that the davening should be specifically like the Ketores, more than any other carbon. Why is it special, Ketores? The Menorah Samar writes that we find that Ketores on Yom Kippur was so special that Aaron HaKohen on Yom Kippur brought 14 karbonis, but during the Hakrava of the 14 karbonis, he never asked for any personal requests or requests for Klal Yisrael. Only when V'nosanas HaKetoros Ala Eish Lifnei Hashem, when the Ketores came and the smoke came, only then he felt it was the proper time to ask for Ketores. What is this? What's so special about the Ketores? So the Meir and the Vuchim, believe it or not, the Rambam says a very interesting thing, that by the Ketores, the reason, the greatness of the Ketores is, I'll read you a quote from the Meir and the Vuchim, that because every day they would shech many karbonis, behemoths in the Beis Hamikdash, and in the Beis Hamikdash they would cut meat, a lot of meat, and it would be burnt, and it would be washed, and it would be intestines and schmutz from the behemoth. So the Beis Hamikdash, with the busyness that goes on, there was not a pleasant smell always, because of the amount of animals they shechted. So therefore, the Eibishter asked that you should bring ketores twice a day, once b'boker and once bein arbaim, just to make this. The Rambam simplifies. I just told you that ketores is such a great avodah. The same Rambam in Meir Nevuchim Chele Gimel Perik Memhei simplifies it, just to make that the Beis Hamikdash should have a more pleasant smell and not the butcher shop type of smell, Rahman al from the older karbonis. So you make that the Eibishter asked for the ketores. But obviously, all the Mefarshim who discuss this Meir Nevuchim say that it must be much deeper. It must be that the smell of the animals, of the karbonis, is not only a physical smell, it's actually the smell of the Arvedus. The people are bringing karbonis for kaparas, for atonement. So it's the negative smell. It's the Arvedus that are circulating here. And the Maisa Ketores had the power to push away all the negative smell. As mentioned before, that Ptum Haktoras we say 3 times. The reason why we say 3 times, we say it once by Shachris, once by Mincha, because that's how it was in the Beis Hamikdash. As the quote that we say in the Ptum Haktoras right before there, you do it in the morning, in the time of the Karban Shel Shachar, and you do it Bein Arbaim, in the time of the Karban Shel Bein Arbaim. Now this alone we find a complication of Achleikis. Was the Ketores done before the Tamid or after the Tamid? But L'Poyel, we paskin that first was the Tamid, and that's why we say the Karban Tamid first. After the Karban Tamid, we do the Kohen would do the Ketores, And the same would be in Bein Arbayim. So where does this come about that we say it again at the end of davening, right before we leave shul, right before Aleinu? And the Arizal says tremendous things about somebody who says that Ptom Aktoros as he leaves shul. He says that saves you from death, that saves you from any chitzonim. That one is very, very important. And that is an additional part to say. So Ptom Aktoros is something that we say 3 times, even more than it was in the Beis HaMikdash, which leads to my next point. We daven as a replica or as a replacement for the fact that we Nebuch don't have a Beis HaMikdash. We do a lot of things similar to how it was in the Beis HaMikdash. So the question, the $1 million question comes up, when we say Ketores, we're saying it as sort of as a replacement for the Ketores that was in the Beis HaMikdash. There is a pasuk that scares you. The pasuk says that V'im chisar echad mikol samemaneh. If somebody putting the Ketores together, incidentally, it didn't have to be the Kohen Gadol. If somebody putting the Ketores together missed one of the Samamanim, chayev missa. So therefore, the Aruch HaShulchan writes, and the Rebbe had this minig, that when you say the Ptom Aktoros, you actually count to make sure that there are the 11 Samamanim, to make sure that it shouldn't be im chisar echad. Some poskim, the Beis Yosef writes, that because of this fear of im chisar echad because samar chayev missa, they didn't want to say even Ptom Aktoros, because you might be running through it and skip it. Other poskim challenge it and say, I understand that saying Ptom Aktoros is to replace the fact that we are not physically doing it. But the Poyo, you can't put it in the same status, in the same league, as the person who's makriv diktoros, maktir diktoros. By the person who's maktir diktoros, obviously, chisa echad mikol samamel chayu misa. But the person saying it, of course, he should try to be careful, but because of that, to eliminate it and say not to say it, that's not something that's an option. You should say it and be very careful. However, we don't say it nighttime because Ketores, because nighttime is din, and Ketores will have a big struggling with the din. 2 interesting points about the Ketores. Number 1, in Chassidus and Kabbalah it says everywhere that the number 10 is a complete number. Kedusha is 10. Here, the Ketores is Dafkas Yud Aleph Samamanim. What's the significance of that? The significance of that is that the Ketores is so powerful, what it contains is so powerful that it could go into the courtyard of the Klippa. 11, the odd number is Klippa, and uproot even that. That's one beautiful lesson. The second lesson is we find that from the Ketores, one of the Ketores was a chelbana. What is chelbana? So the Gemara says that it is something that has a very, very bad smell. On its own, you can't stand around it. It's very bad smell. But when you mix it in with amongst other things, then it gets gobbled and it gets lost. So there are 2 lessons from this chelbana. Number 1, that the Gemara says in Krisus, Kol tefillah she'ein ba miposhi Yisrael, the bad smelling thing symbolizes the Russia. And if the Ketores needs chelbana in there, that means to say that any tefillah, if you have a tzibur, if you have a minyan, you should make sure there's a Poshi Yisrael, somebody who's in that level. And without that, ain't a tefillah. And as we know, the Rosh Hashanah from the word tzibur, it's tzadikim, beinim, or rishoim. Only if you have all of them, it makes up a tzibur. A second thing, another beautiful thing that you'll learn from that, is that the Rasha not only has to be included, and then he's part of, your tzibur, but as it's mentioned, there has to be hadek hativ. The Rasha could be included if it's crushed together altogether, and therefore it doesn't stand out and become on its own a metzias, a yesh. But if it still stands out and you're still able to make this bad smell, his bad influence on others, then obviously it's something you have to stay away from. But hopefully when you include the Rasha in the group, the Rasha becomes nisbato, and it's really a number 10, which is all Kedusha.